This is Tasmania's rugged west coast. It is a wild, unforgiving landscape. For thousands of years, the Palawa people of Tasmania lived in this region, building trading and transportation paths all across the region. However, as with most of the state, this changed. By the 1870s, the west coast was emerging as a major producer of mineral traffic in colonial-era Tasmania. Railway links to the region were desperately needed. The key to this was the Van Diemen's Land Company. Their land grant covered the whole area between the port of Emu Bay and the new tin mining hub of Mount Bischoff. A plan was hatched, work began, and the first railway to the west coast was born. Hi, I'm Tasmanian, and this is Last Train to Zeehan, a history of the Emu Bay Railway. On the 4th of December 1871, a man named James Philosopher Smith discovered rich tin ore at Mount Bischoff. Mount Bischoff is located 53 kilometres from the port of Emu Bay, which was the main Van Diemen's Land base for the northwest coast. Massive amounts of prospectors from Tasmania and the mainland were making their way to Mount Bischoff through Emu Bay. As more and more tin was discovered, the town of Waratah was founded on a plain to the south of the mines. The town blossomed, but access was incredibly difficult. During the winter snow seasons, the tracks became virtually impassable, and the government was pressured to rectify the situation. The government did not own the land between Emu Bay and Waratah, however, which was owned by the Van Diemen's Land Company. Its contiguous Emu Bay, Hampshire Hills, and Surrey Hills estates covered almost all the land in between Waratah and the coast. The primarily agricultural company soon put two and two together, realised there were a lot of business opportunities from hauling the rich ore to the port of Emu Bay, and began construction on a rail link to Waratah. However, due to the company's reputation for tardiness, a horse-drawn wooden-railed tramway was built for 45 miles between the Port of Burnie and Rouse's Camp, located around 2 miles from Waratah. The tramway ended here because the VDL Company refused to pay the price for Rouse's farm, which was needed for the link through Waratah. The tramway opened on the 1st of February 1878 and was considered a feat of construction. Demand on the tramway was more than the company could have ever foresaw, to the rate where it had to only operate in one direction at a time, with it switching at the end of the day. Seeing the massive success, the VDO Company finally paid the price for Rouse's farm and extended the tramway 2 miles and 46 chains into Waratah in 1881. This brought the tramway to 47 miles long, an incredibly long distance for a horse-drawn tramway. Although the extension helped with transshipping problems, there still wasn't enough capacity for all the materials passing to Waratah. Locals and visitors expected a faster and more luxurious service. The directors of the VDL Company finally conceded, and the decision was made to converting to a heavy rail line to Waratah. The new heavy rail line ran on the same alignment as the old horse tramway and was built to the Tasmanian standard of 3'6" narrow gauge. The railway's construction is built to the same standards as the Tasmanian Mainline Railway Company, or TMLR. The standard of this line is aptly described in a statement from the Mercury in 1890, stating that TMLR stands for Too Many Loose Rails. The Indian State Railways reject rails were considered unsafe for use on the railway, and the Huns that locomotives ordered were unsuitable to the tough Tasmanian conditions, but were still used in the short term, while no replacements were available. The 47-mile, 54-chain heavy railway line opened at a cost of £81,526 on the 15th of July 1884. The weatherproof carriages and relatively fast service were well received by the local residents. A journey from Emu Bay and Waratah took 3.5 hours, with major stations established in Pigeon Hill, Hampshire, Ridgewood, and For the next few years, the railway served the residents of Waratah extremely well. Unsurprisingly, the Van Diemen's Land Company looked to on-sell the railway to gain a profit and return to its agricultural origins. A price tag of £175,000 was agreed on, and the railway passed to the Emu Bay and Mount Bischoff Railway Company, which took over the railway on the 1st of July 1887. The first order of business was to order a third locomotive, a Scottish Nielsen locomotive. This was far more powerful than the existing Hunslet locomotives, but it was difficult to drive and damaged the track significantly. This led to it spending most of its lifetime as a shunting engine at stations along the line. For 10 years, the railway stayed relatively steady. Despite the major success of the railway, it was becoming difficult for the Mount Bischoff Company to operate the railway. The debenture interest rates were simply too high for the fledgling company to continue running the railway. However, much interest had been shown in extending the railway south to the promising Mount Reid, Mount Dundas, and Mount Zeehan mining fields. It was the main incentive for the 27th of August 1897 agreement with James Reid, a director of the Broken Hill Proprietary Company, to lease out the Waratah railway line. On the very same day, Reid secured the rights transfer of the Van Diemen's Land Company's rights to extend the railway south. On the 6th of October that year, James Reid founded the Emu Bay Railway Company, and a new chapter in the history of West Coast transport began. Immediately after acquisition of the line, the Emu Bay Railway Company started looking for a route south. The point they chose to begin the line was a location 37.5 miles south of Burnie, known as the Junction, or later Guildford Junction. The existing section of railway between Guildford and Burnie became the main line, while the section from Guildford to Waratah became the Waratah branch. Traffic was still there, the heyday of Waratah was beginning to pass, and freight and passenger numbers were declining. Tin mining was on the back burner of progress in Tasmania. Prospectors no longer needed to travel to visit Waratah, to visit the southern fields. There was massive backlash by the majority of the state in response to this new railway proposal. The bitter parochial attitudes of the northern and southern regions, both of which had their own proposals for railways to the west, was almost enough to pull the project down. Despite this, 150,000 shares of £1 each were placed on the market. This was simply not enough. 400,086 shares were bid on, with the majority of these bids being placed by Victorians. Hobart was the least supportive area in Oceania for this project, with only 3,731 bids sent by them. Shortly after bids closed, controversy emerged in the parochial heartlands of Tasmania, where it was revealed that the mainland advertising for the Emu Bay Railway had detailed a branch line to the copper-rich heartlands of Mount Lyell. This was enough to settle the Southerners, who wanted their Great Western Railway to be the only direct link to the Mount Lyell fields. Railway leagues met in Hobart and Launceston. Southern politicians banded together to place a no-confidence vote in the current Braddon government, a staunch supporter of the Emu Bay project. A similar combination of North and Northwestern politicians was sufficient to stop this vote, and the project continues. This ended the plans for the Great Western Railway, but was a major milestone for the Emu Bay Railway. The branch line to Mount Lyell was surveyed, coming in at a length of 40 miles and 56 chains, but was never completed. Less than a year into the company's history, the political stability of Tasmania had been rocked and the state divided in two. A large construction camp and a sawmill were built at Guildford Junction, and construction began in 1898. James Stirling became engineer-in-chief and Richard Anquetel as survey engineer. An ubiquitous Fox Walker locomotive was purchased alongside several wagons used on the Sorrel Railway. It is unclear if they were ever used. The Hunslet and Nielsen locomotives were deemed unfit for the task and were left to run the Waratah traffic. Most of the construction work was handled by two South Australian Martin locomotives, which were more powerful and better suited to the steep terrain. Initial progress through the Surrey Hills was fast, but became far slower and dragged out after Hatfield, where the Quay River Valley proved incredibly difficult going for construction, with the Quay River Bridge being a three-tiered wooden trestle bridge constructed on a sweeping bend. During the first year, over 1,000 railway navvies had constructed 13 miles of track and cleared another 8. The first significant obstacle was the Pieman River. The massive gorge had to be crossed on a large steel lattice-framed bridge, which was slowly cantilevered over the river in a dangerous exercise that saw 3 workers killed. On the 6th of February 1899, train services were introduced to the temporary town of Brookville on the north bank of the Pieman River. The bridge was tested on the 16th of June 1899, and the railway's was completed all the way to Rosebery by August that year. Funding was becoming a worry, however. Another 100,000 shares being placed on the market in September 1898, with only 45,173 shares sold. To gain necessary funding, the VDL Company had to sell debenture shares at 5% interest in England to enable construction through to Zeehan, which would come back to haunt them later. The 17-mile section from Rosebery to Zeehan was the most challenging to construct. The agreed link with the Tasmanian Government Railways network was at Leslie Junction on the Dundas Tramway, but to enable faster running times, the Mount Dundas and Zeehan Railway Company's line to Dundas was purchased and used to link to the TGR network at Zeehan Racecourse, which became known as Rainer Junction. 3 large bridges had to be constructed between Zeehan and Rosebery, the largest being the Ring River Bridge. The last challenge before Zeehan was the Serpentine Hill, which was tunnelled under in a quarter-mile tunnel known as the Argent. A line inspection train was the first to run through to Zeehan on the 18th of December 1900, followed by the official opening of the line from Guildford Junction to Zeehan on the 21st of December 1900, featuring brass bands, speeches, and a grand ball in Zeehan. The 48-mile extension had cost the company the £394,535. Passenger services ran 6 days a week, leaving Burnie at 7:15 a.m, arriving in Zeehan at 12:58 p.m, leaving Zeehan at 1:50 p.m, and arriving in Burnie at 7:33 p.m. The train was initially scheduled to have stops at 5 Miles, Ridgely, Guildford Junction, the Pieman River, and Rosebery. Connection could be made with the train to Waratah at Guildford Junction. Initially, the fare on the railway was 36 shillings and 8 dimes for first class and 27 shillings 6 dimes for second class. The cost was expensive, but the ability to travel from Zeehan to Burnie in 6 hours was well received. The work of James Sterling as supervising engineer saw him promoted to the role of general manager of the Emu Bay Railway Company, which he held until 1934 when he retired due to a decline in his health. Just prior to the completion of works on the railway, the VDL Company ordered 3 locomotives from Dubbs & Co. of Glasgow. These 3 steam locomotives were necessary for pulling freight up the steep grades out of the Pieman Valley. They arrived in Emu Bay on the 30th of December 1900 aboard the SS Waikato, before being assembled for trialling shortly after. They were the mainstay of the VDL for over 30 years. On the 15th of April 1901, the TGR's Western Line was extended to Emu Bay, causing an increase in traffic. This, however, still did not meet expected patronage levels, although the opening of the Magnet and North Mount Farrell tramways in 1901 and 1902 respectively did bolster traffic. The first operating profit experienced by the railway came in 1905, with more money rolling in over the next decade. 1907 and 1912 were the best performing years in the early days of the railway. These were still insufficient to pay off the constantly increasing debenture or yield a dividend to the many shareholders in the company. In 1909, a Riley rail motor was ordered for the company, which worked mainly on the Waratah branch. The speed and comfort of the rail motor was not to be matched in the early days of the railway. Now follows a brief overview of the route of the Emu Bay Railway. Starting at the port of Emu Bay, the station at Burnie was known as Burnie Junction until the ATN Tasrail takeover, when it became simply known as Burnie. The VDL Company line followed the Western Line under the Bass Height before turning southwards and winding through the steep hills of Emu Heights. The first station was located at Pigeon Hill in Romaine. Subsequent stations were located at Ridgely, Highclere, Hampshire, and Ringwood. Here the line enters the true west coast, with windy alignments and steep valleys. Stations at Waratah and Hellyer were passed until Guildford Junction. This was the junction with the branch line to Waratah, which had stations at Rouse's Camp, Magnet, and Waratah. Continuing south from Guildford, stations were located at Hatfield, the Quay River, Bulgaback, Boko, Chester, Farrell Junction, Brookville, Primrose Junction, and Rosebery. This was the station for the most important mining centre of the Mount Reid district. The last section of the line passed through steep terrain to Zeehan. Stations were located at Renison Bell, Melba Flats, Rainer Junction, and Zeehan. Here connections could be made with the local tramways and the Strahan to Zeehan line. The EBR Company was closely linked to the Mount Lyell Mining and Railway Company from the start, with many shared directors such as William Jamieson and Bowles Kelly. This was best shown in the activities around Chester. The Mount Lyell Company started a pyrites mine at Chester near Tulla. It railed its produce from there along the Emu Bay Railway at Chester siding to Burnie. The collapse of the Chester works in 1913 forced the Mount Lyell Company to pay the EBR Company £8,000 in reparations. This was crucial to the success of the EBR Company as it kept them through the mining collapse at Zeehan and Dundas, where they lost £20,000 in revenue in a single year from a mass collapse of the mining markets in the area. Improvement did not return until the 1920s. As well as the lean years on the mining fields, the Ring River Bridge was destroyed on March 6, 1917. It took 6 months to rebuild the bridge, causing through traffic to Zeehan to have to terminate at Renison Bell. The Dundas and Zeehan mining fields never recovered from 1913, but operations at Rosebery were the key to success on the corridor. The Electrolyte Zinc Company of Australia, or EZ, made a massive expansion of its Mount Reid and Rosebery operations. However, the railway almost met its end just as this started to happen. In 1923, the debenture interest for the EBR Company rose to £227,964, while £41,100 were due on unpaid rentals. In 1924, all the assets of the Emu Bay and Mount Bischoff Railway Company's assets were transferred to the EBR Company to save the day for the railway company. This meant the rental no longer needed to be paid on the Waratah to Emu Bay section. During the early 1920s, the EZ Company had expanded their operations around Mount Reid to the south of Rosebery. There was much debate over if the ore be sent to Zeehan via the North East Dundas Tramway or via the EBR from Rosebery. The decision favoured Zeehan. The North East Dundas Tramway would haul traffic from Williamsford to Zeehan, and the EBR would short haul the Rosebery ore to Zeehan. They would then be sent down the Strahan to Zeehan line and shipped out of the state through Regatta Point. If it would go via Rosebery, the EBR would earn massive amounts of money from carrying the ore to Emu Bay. Extremely competitive quotes were sent out by the Emu Bay Company, and they were successful. An aerial cableway was built from the Hercules mine to Rosebery, and the NE Dundas Tramway closed on the 30th of June 1929. This deal was the saviour to the EBR Company, but it left them a slave to the EZ Company for over 20 years. The site of the new developments caused General Manager Sterling to review the rolling stock used on the railway. There was nowhere near enough to haul the projected ore loads. 3 massive Bayer Garrett locomotives were ordered from England of a similar type to the government's K, L and M classes. They arrived on MV Port Ormer on the 14th of February in Emu Bay and were first trialled on the 2nd of March that year. However, due to the Great Depression coming in, the locomotives were temporarily mothballed in Burnie during 1930. Through the Depression, the company kept afloat, but barely. On October 1st, 1934, Frederick McCormick replaced Sterling as general manager. As 1935 drew to a close, the EZ Company's Rosebery Mill prepared to open. After a history of penny pinching and tardiness, McCormick invested in rolling stock repairs, extensions to passing loops, and heavy maintenance in the railway. The Rosebery concentration mills reopened on the 19th of February 1936, and the effect on the railway was instantaneous. Annual receipts jumped from £40,000 to £86,000, and the freight carried quadrupled. The profit that year was the highest since 1912. An English Walker Gardiner rail motor was introduced, priced at WG1 and improved passenger service. A slight tarnish on the good times was the closure of the Waratah branch in 1940 due to low patronage and opening of road links to Burnie and Guildford. Despite this, the railway prospered through the Second World War, with profits improving and usage increasing. This went so far that in 1944, 3 Australian Standard Garrett locomotives were ordered. These were a great success on the EBR, unlike on the Tasmanian Government Railways network, and became crucial to the day-to-day running of the network. In the 1950s, consolidation of the network became a priority. The longevity of the steam locomotives was starting to wear on them, and the first diesel hydraulic locomotive was ordered as a test for the steep grades of the West Coast. Classified as PVH1, the locomotive arrived in Burnie on the MV Herefordshire on the 18th of September 1953 and was trialled that November. Although it broke down in trial, the diesel locomotive saved time and money compared to the steam locomotives, began running immediately after trial. On the 30th of September 1958, Frederick McCormick was replaced by Bernard Fagan as general manager. At the start of the 1960s, the remaining Bear Garrett, ASG, and Dubs locomotives were nearing the end of their lifespans. At the same time, roadworks were beginning on the Murchison Highway to link Rosebery with Guildford and Burnie. The VDL Company looked to cater to tourist traffic between Burnie and the West Coast. The daily rail motor service from Zeehan to Burnie was replaced by the West Coaster service. Pulled by the two remaining Dubs steam locomotives, the West Coaster was a motor rail service where flatbed wagons with cars and buses strapped on were pulled alongside the carriages. The service normally left Burnie at 8 a.m. with foot passengers, stopped at all the stations to Guildford, and would stop for 15 minutes for passengers to have a light refreshment at the station, and the flat-top wagons, cars, and buses were coupled to the train set. Passengers with motor vehicles would arrive earlier and board the train. The passenger carriages were located at the end of the consist. The journey continued south through the rugged terrain of Rosebery after this, where the cars and buses were unloaded and the motorists continued to their final destinations around the west coast and beyond. The train, along with any foot passengers, continued on through to Zeehan, where it terminated. The same applied on the way back, with a break at Rosebery instead of Guildford. The two Dubs steam locomotives were converted to oil firing as an economic measure before they went on the West Coaster, where they were painted blue. The two locomotives were named Number 6 Murchison and Number 8 Heemskerk. They were named after two prominent local mountains. In the winter, where there weren't many passengers, some ore trucks would be hauled by the West Coaster as well, making it a mixed train. In 1963, the Murchison Highway opened, causing the closure of the North Mount Farrell tramway, which linked to the ABR at Farrell Junction. On the 6th of January 1964, the last West Coaster service ran. This cessation saw passenger numbers drop from 23,138 in 1963 to 3,741 in 1964. A daily mixed train still ran from Rosebery to Zeehan, but in 1965 the section from Rosebery to Zeehan was closed, following the closure of the Strawn to Zeehan and Mount Lyell railways. In 1963, 3 new diesel hydraulic locomotives were ordered from Walkers Limited in Queensland and became the 10 class. The former Mount Lyell Company Vulcan Drury locomotives were purchased for use as shunters at Burnie. The company finally paid off its debt by the 1960s, and for the first time in its history was swimming freely without a bill to pay. The first dividend in the railway's history was paid to shareholders in 1965 after a brief 65-year period of waiting for some shareholders. The EZ Company soon was interested in fully purchasing the railway. Finally, on the 2nd of February 1967, the Emu Bay Company was removed from the stock market and became a wholly owned subsidiary of Electrolyte Zinc Industries Limited. Steam locomotives were removed from the fleet, with the last service being run by ASG 16 from Zeehan on the 8th of March 1964, and all the steam locomotives were scrapped, beside the 2 West Coastal locomotives, which became static exhibits at Zeehan and Burnie. Murchison now remains as an exhibit at the West Coast Heritage Museum in Zeehan, and Heemskerk has been restored to operating condition at the Don. After the acquisition of the company by EZ Industries, one of the first things to happen was a new deal with the Mount Lyell Company. A sulfuric acid plant was built in Wivenhoe, an industrial suburb of Burnie. The 4th 10-class locomotive was built at the TGR Launceston Workshops, started operations on the 23rd of March 1966. In 1969, a ship loader for the Port of Burnie was constructed to facilitate direct transfers of ore from the west coast to the world markets. The Mount Lyell Company also started planning for the diversion of its mineral traffic from Strawn to Burnie. 5 new diesel hydraulic locomotives were ordered from Walkers Limited and arrived in Burnie upon the MV Brisbane trader. These were known as the 11 class. With this, the last rail motors were sold and scrapped, with WG1 being the last to go. The acid plant at Wivenhoe opened in 1970 as the North West Acid Pty Ltd, but was not profitable. A short branch line from the TGL Western Line ran to the plant and became known as Seddon siding. 2 more 11 class locomotives were built and arrived in Burnie on the MV Brisbane Trader on the 19th of March 1971. Meanwhile, on the west coast, work was underway on reopening a 12-mile section of track between Rosebery and the Melba Flats. A large concentrate loading facility opened here at Melba Flats, about 5 miles from Zeehan. Concentrates from Mount Lyell were trucked here, where they were bulk loaded to Burnie, a process that has continued on and off to this day. The acid plant at Wivenhoe closed in August 1979 to the joy of local residents who complained of roof and car corrosion. The Easy Company's works at Rosebery were again expanded, giving the Emu Bay Railway more traffic than it had ever carried. During the late 1970s, work on the Pymon River Power Development Scheme had led to the railing of cement and other construction materials to Boco siding until the mid-1980s. In 1982, experimentation began with running extra long trains existing up to 9 locomotives. The mixed trains were withdrawn in November of 1983 as the last passenger carriages were sold. By 1984, Easy Industries was purchased by the North Broken Hill Holding Company, which gave the Emu Bay operations more new management. Freight volume slowly recovered after the loss of the acid plant. Openings of the Quay River and Hellyer mines helped the railway put itself together in the 1980s. In February 1988, work commenced on building a new branch line on the railway from Mount Morey Junction, located to the south of Guildford, through to the Hellyer mine. The railway comprised easy grades and long straights. The former Mount Lyell Drury shunting engine was used on construction works. The locomotive was trialled on the 15th of March 1989 and opened on the 10th of April of that year. All trains were hauled by 10 and 11 class diesel locomotives. Up to 4 ore trains ran daily between Burnie Junction and Hellyer. Some infrequent worker specials ran from Burnie using leased carriages from various heritage preservation groups. In December 1988, ownership changed hands again when North Broken Hill Holdings merged with Conzinc Rio Tinto Australia. This formed Tasmanian Limited, which took over ownership of the line. In 1994, the Mount Lyell Company closed its doors after 101 years of mining, and the last concentrate train left Melbourne on the 14th of December 1991. The closure of the Melba Flats to Rosebery line was short-lived, as in 1996, Copper Mines of Tasmania took over ownership of the Mount Lyell mine and resumed production. Rail traffic recommenced on the 16th of December 1996. 1997 was the centenary year for the EBR, which occurred in October of that year. Passenger specials and steam locomotives were some special events during that year. By 1997, 3 to 4 trains ran every day on the line. 2 a day ran to Hellyer, once a weekday to Primrose Junction, and 3 a week to Melba Flats. Sadly, this was all about to change. In 1998, the railway had its first strike in its history, and shortly after, Australian Transport Network Tasrail, the operator of the rest of the Tasmanian network, took over operations, and the line became known as the Melba Line. In June 2000, the Hellyer mine closed. Freight services were withdrawn after the last concentrate train ran to Burnie on the 15th of June, and the last train was a joint steam-diesel passenger special for staff and workers at the mine, which ran on the 23rd of June that year. The line was closed and the points were removed at Morey Junction. The track has remained mothballed since, and there's a waiting game to see if the new owner of the Hellyer mine, NQ Minerals, will develop operations enough that the line is reopened. In 1998, after the transfer of ownership to ATN Tasrail, the Track Warrant Control Safe Working System was introduced to control track workings, while a regular log train ran from Hampshire to Wiltshire Junction on the Western Line. In March 2002, the 10 and 11 class locomotives were rendered useless after air brake locomotives were required for usage on the Melba Line, their vacuum braking systems not being permitted anymore. 10 of the 11 original EBR locomotives were sold, 1002 being the only ones remaining in Tasmania in operational condition at the Don River Railway. In 2009, the government-owned Tasmanian Railway Pty Ltd, Tasrail, took over all mainline operation in Tasmania, bringing the Emu Bay Railway under government control for the first time in its history. In the later part of 2011, concrete hauling on the Melbourne line decreased as several small mines were closed. Tasrail ordered a new fleet of 17 TR-class locomotives to be the new mainstay of the freight rail fleet in Tasmania. Following their arrival in 2013 to 2014, they were placed on service on every line except the Melbourne line. Due to its lighter rails, the powerful TR class did not run on the line, and 4 former Queensland Rail 2150 class locomotives were restored as the 2050 class to run all services on the Melbourne line. In 2014, problems emerged at Mount Lyell related to mining safety, leading to the mining closure of the region and cessation of all copper production. The section of the Melbourne line between Melbourne Flats and Primrose was again closed in 2014 and currently exists in a care and maintenance mode until the mine is reopened. A contract was signed with the new operator of the Hellyer gold mine to rail minerals from Hatfield. If demand increases sufficiently, the old Hellyer branch will be reopened, a promising sign for the future of the railway. The old ship loader at the Port of Burnie was replaced with a new one with double the efficiency in October of 2024. This brings us up to date with the history of the Emu Bay Railway and its branch lines. The future of the Melbourne line appears likely to remain fairly unchanged for several years or decades. The reopening of the Hellyer branch is a potential, but I certainly won't be holding my breath. It's likely the mine may never reach sufficient demand or will spend decades reaching this, and by then the deal may have expired or a new operator may have taken control of the Tasmanian rail network. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time on Tasmanian. Make sure to like and subscribe.